Well, it's good to see everyone here this morning. Looks like we're a little short on attendance, but we're glad that you're here, and we'll try to go through our lesson this morning and try to learn a thing or two. If you have a book, we're on lesson 11, and this is one of the more important lessons that we could study from. The aim of this lesson is to discover the divine plan of financing the work of the church as given by the inspired Apostle Paul. Almost all of our Bible referencing this morning will come from 1 Corinthians 16:2, and I had that. I closed it out, 1 Corinthians 16:2. We'll go ahead and read that. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. Every movement requires finances to succeed. Even Jesus Christ had a treasurer. Who was that? He was also a thief. It takes money to operate in evangelism and benevolence, and for the sake of our own souls and the souls of others, we must learn and obey the truth on giving. This lesson confines itself primarily to this one passage that we just read in 1 Corinthians. Our giving needs to be regular and periodic, and there's some examples here of what people might say when somebody asks me, and it's forgotten that God has already asked. We need to remember that. We've got enough evidence in the Bible and commandments for us to give that we shouldn't have to wait for somebody to ask us to give. Some people might say, when I make a fortune, which is once in a lifetime thing, and most of us have never been blessed by that. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, to be honest, but when all my debts are paid, based on perhaps my own actions and the actions that I've heard other people talk about, this might be, number 3, might be the one thing that we need to reevaluate the most. When all my debts are paid, well, your debts are never all going to be paid, and if you go by that, everything we do, everything we want to do, everything we need, some things we don't need to do, we just want to do it. And when we do that and we incur debt, like say a credit card or something like that, well, you got to pay it back. Well, if we get enough of that going on, we end up putting all of that responsibility that's on ourselves way up here at the front, and or up here really in the front. We could stay in debt continually and never give. When I am present, expenses of the church go on in our absence. Everybody goes on vacations, and everybody goes to visit family in other states or something, or a lot of people get sick and can't come. But the point that we want to make this morning is in our first section up here, in 1, it says giving is to be regular and periodic. The fact that we give every Sunday, we're faithful Christians and we're here every Sunday, does that just mean, well, we give our share, so don't ask for nothing else? You know, we see a need that somebody has. I hope if there's nothing that we've learned from this stewardship study is that we're not going to be penalized for the giving that we help other people and give to people that don't have. I read somewhere, I forgot where it was, I wasn't prepared to even talk about it, but there's people that it says if somebody borrows from you, don't even expect it back. There was a lady that lives next door to us, very meager conditions. Used to be a nursery packing barn, but some Spanish people bought that farm, and they went in and made her, I don't know if it's one of them's sister or who it is, but she sits out on the front all the time in a chair. And I went over there on my lawnmower and told her who I was and told her if she ever needed us to help her do anything, let us know. Well, one day she knocked on the door, and no, she didn't knock, she rang the doorbell, and I got a real loud doorbell. And she wanted to know if I had one of those air spray things to clean out a computer keyboard. And I said, well, I used to. Let me go look. And so I went and looked, and I found one, and I sprayed it, and it sprayed. So I took it to her, and I said, now I don't know how many times that's going to do, if that'll do enough for you. And she said, well, I'll see. Well, she come back over there and said that wasn't enough. and I thought, my first thought was, okay, well, what do you want me to do? I gave you what I had, but she said, you're not going to the store anytime, are you? And I said, well, I'm going to be going to the grocery store tonight. I'll pick you up one. It was Wednesday, and we stopped, and I went in there, and I got everything under the sun except air. I was going to get one for her and one for me, and I forgot it. So the next morning, she come over and knocked on the door, or rang the doorbell, and said, did you get that air for me? And I said, no, I didn't. But I said, I'll tell you what I'll do here in just a few minutes. I've been wanting to go up to Smithville to eat breakfast. I'll go up there and eat breakfast, and then I'll go get us both some air. When I came back, she wasn't there, so I just set the air out there on the chair, and ain't heard a word from her. Knowing good and well that it cost something, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that, based on the fact that I'm not supposed to expect it back. I don't even know that I'm going to let her pay me back when she comes, but we give because we should give, and people need us to give. There are just some people. I've heard some people that have been on missionary trips that come back and they have a changed life. You don't know what poor is until you go overseas. And people that here that think they're poor, they sit out on the front porch, and well, number one, these people don't even have a house, and not to mention they don't have a chair, but they learn to live with that. But in our case, when there's somebody that we see that needs help with something, particularly financial, and it's not just handing them money necessarily, but it is helping them get the things that they need, and the Lord will repay us for that. Another situation might be when I am dead through my will. The problem with that, if this would avoid any personal sacrifice. See, the plan that God has is for us to give as we've been prospered. And when we give as we've been prospered, we feel good about doing something for the Lord and for the church, and for knowing that the church is going to do things for other people. And that's a good feeling. I heard the other day of someone that had left a huge amount of money to a church, and that's pretty impressive. I told my boys that they probably ain't gonna get nothing because I plan on spending all of it, but there ain't much to spend, so it wouldn't take long. But we need to give while we can give and while we're aware that we can give. And all of these are human traditions and make void the word of God. Thus ye make the commandment of God of none effect, by your traditions, Matthew 15:16. Now, concerning 1 Corinthians 16 that we just read, what does the members of the Church of Christ stand by when it comes to partaking the Lord's Supper? What is something that we absolutely stand on? First day of the week. Now, since it didn't tell us how many first days a week, then it stands to reason it's every first day of the week. In Acts 20, verse 7, it says, for the first day of the week when the disciples came together to break bread. That on the first day of the week they came together to break bread. Breaking bread this was not sitting down and having a sandwich. This was a term used for the Lord's Supper. Now, so of our verse this morning, upon the first day of the week, that's every first day. Now, it talks about here, I had to look this up, what an emphatic diaglot translation was. And I looked it up, and I'll just read, I wrote it too small, I'll have to stick it up here. It's a two-language translation and is an interlinear translation that includes the original Greek text and a word for word English translation in the first left column and a full English translation in the right column. That'd probably be something good to have. It sounds like it might be too complicated for me, but anytime we have a trouble with what a word means in the Bible, of course, the best thing to do is always go to the Greek. None of us in here that I'm aware of are capable of speaking Greek. I know a few Greek words, but not too many. Not enough to say that I know anything. But it says, every first day of the week, let every one of you lay something by itself, depositing as he may be prospered, so when I come, collections may not then be made. So that's how it's stated in that translation. If you'll turn the page to number 50, Clement of Alexandria. Now, there were some popes, I hate to even bring that word up, but there were some popes that were named Clement. This is not of that line. This is back in, I think it said I looked it up and it said 112 to 220 AD. So this was not long after the church was established. Clement of Alexander was a Christian, and in some of his writings he says we need to take care that we perform our offerings and services to God at their appointed seasons. For these he has commanded to be done not by chance and disorderly, but at certain times and certain hours. We meet on certain times and certain hours. Now, this is not inspired, but it does bring up a good point. We do meet on the first day of the week, and we meet at specific times. So this was true then, too, apparently. In Deuteronomy 16:16, remember the Lord said, his people shall not appear before the Lord empty. And in 23:21, it says, they shall not be slack to pay it, and they shall not delay. We've talked about the joy of giving. God could reach down from heaven and make this church just flat prosper, numerically and spiritually. But he gives us the word. He wants us to do things on our own. He wants us to experience the joy of giving to somebody that has nothing, so that we will benefit from our giving. And I've got here to emphasize, C.R. Nichols says that this does not mean that you are never to give at any other time. And we just talked about that. When does Galatians 6:10 say that we're able to do good unto all men? When do we do that? Is we have opportunity, especially those of who? Household of faith.
Oftentimes, Terry, we see things that take place in our lives and other people around us. And oftentimes we can, we just look and pass on by. And the Scripture does teach us here that if there's an opportunity, if there's a will or a need, then we ought to do our best to try to fulfill that need.
And they did that in the first century. They immediately after the church was established and there was thousands baptized, there was a disproportionate amount of blessings, and the church tried to sort of bring that into balance. Now, that doesn't mean that if I've got more than Steve's got, which I know I don't, but if I had more than Steve, that doesn't mean that I need to go sell a few acres so that it'll be a little more on the level. This is all based around need. And you'll notice it talks about those of the household of faith. These people that we worship with, these are children of God, and these are people that when they're in need, you work extra hard to make sure that they're not in need and those needs are met. But it's not exclusive to the members of the church or the family of God, but it's primary. And we do that by the same love and by the same gratitude and generosity. We do that to those that are outside the church too. I went down to a parole hearing for a young man, and Brother Bost went with me, and this young man had been doing his lessons real regular, and boy, he looked so dejected when the girl told him that she was not going to make a recommendation based on his behavior there, and I thought, well, it seems like he's behaving, but what he hadn't told me and what he hadn't told anybody else was that the reason that he was in protective custody wasn't because people were picking on him. It was because he started fights, and he had accidentally hit a correction officer when he was tangling with somebody else, and the correction officer filed a grievance against him, and they put him in protective custody, and that kept him from getting his due parole for the crime committed and the years sentenced. Somewhere along the 55 to 60%, you should have the opportunity to do that. Well, his was almost to the day 60%. Well, but I didn't know that. I'd have still went down there because out of dedication to him. He's one of our students, and I plan on continuing to do that. And they may none of them get out, but all I can do is tell them that he's doing his job when it comes to his studies. He gets them back quick. He answers all of them. He doesn't get them all right, but I told him he has about a B average, B plus average. He'll always, on every lesson, he'll miss 3 or 4. A lot of them don't miss any, which is really easy to grade. But you just go down through there. Well, I can be done with that in 1 minute. But it didn't work out. But I did what I thought, and Brother Boss did what we thought he needed, and that was somebody to stand up and try to help him. Unfortunately, his penalties that he was receiving overrode any good that we might have done by being there. But it doesn't say do good to people if they deserve it. It doesn't say do good if you feel like it. It says do good unto all men. especially those of the household of faith. So we do it without question. We do it without wondering whether or not we should or shouldn't. I don't know, he looks like he's probably got some money. We don't make that kind of judgment on people. If they need help, we give it to them. And remember that the Lord is going to bless us back more. Remember that pressed down measure. I just opened up another bag of Tostitos, and it's half full, and there's no settling of contents has occurred like it used to say on cereal boxes. But that's not the way that God's going to bless us back. He's going to give us a pressed down measure. That sack is going to be full. Now we don't give and then go, okay, where's my repay? How are you going to repay me? We do it and just count on God to support us and keep us going. He's not going to let us suffer for doing good under any circumstance. Now, giving is to be personal, the second section. No indication here of unnecessary proxies of one giving for another, or of one member of a family for another, or other unnecessary proxies. Our giving is all about following a commandment. And us giving is commanded, and it's for us as well as for those that we're giving to. In this case, we're talking about giving to the church. And I underline this because in number one, it says, it is certainly wise for the parents to decide what they are able to give, and then let every one of the family have a part in it personally. Even those too young to obey the gospel, they should learn to give by giving. Now I want to tell you, and I don't think I'd be alone in saying this, fellas, how many times have you been giving? Have you been taking up the contribution, and you reach over here like this, and there's a time sequence, 1, 2, 3, thank you, 1, 2, and you're just moving along in a rhythm. But all of a sudden you run into a family that's got 2 or 3 kids, maybe a little boy and a little girl, and the daddy puts in his money, the mother puts in hers, the little girl puts in hers, and did a light just come on? I thought, boy, my eyes are really messing up. Oh, that's a lot better. And that little boy, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. It's like, okay, go ahead. The little girl puts it in, hands it to the little boy. Go on, put it in. Put it in. Put it in. That's not, there's some miscommunication there somewhere. That's not what God's wanting us to do. He's not wanting to beat it out of us. He's wanting us to do it because we want to. And of course, this situation right here is to teach the children the joy and necessity of giving. Now, the question would necessarily come up. There can be no doubt that we're to give on the first day of the week. We're to make preparations for that. It's to be in keeping as we've been blessed. However, and number 2, in case of absence due to illness or other providential hindrances, if the contribution were sent, it would of necessity be deposited by proxy, or else made up at the earliest possible time. But we are here speaking of the normal situation, which is what Paul was discussing in this passage. I don't know what everybody else does, but when we go out of town and we go to church at somewhere else, I always feel so proud and so happy to fellowship with another congregation. Don't you feel that way, Steve? It's just, they're good. They're just as good a people as they are here, and they're just welcoming and all this. And then it comes time for the contribution. Kathy leans over and she says, "Are we putting in a contribution, or you want to put it back in church?" I used to say save it and put it back in the church, but I don't do that anymore. I go ahead and put it in that church, because that church and that body of people affords me the opportunity to worship just as well as I would if I was here. And that's the first day of the week. So I feel like that's the thing to do. Even though where we used to go to church, when we would visit in Joelton, Tennessee, they just had to go out and build them a big old church. And then preachers started going a little off kilter, and a lot of people left, and they were having a hard time making their payments. So what we decided to do is every time we were there, I mean, we even started paying in advance. We'd pay 2 or 3 weeks of our contribution to that church because they were in particular need. Well, I shouldn't have done that. That's sort of, I don't know if it's robbing the church we should be going to. I don't know. But I don't do that anymore. I do that now, but I do it per week. Because it's on the first day of the week. And now we can't sit here and say that the Bible is emphatic on taking the Lord's Supper the first day of the week. And at the same time, say, yeah, but that doesn't apply to giving. That's the Lord's Supper only. No, that's part of that process. So I don't know how you do it. I don't really know what I could say would be the right thing to do, but that's what I do. I just go ahead and give to the church I'm at, because I get to thinking, well, you know, they got to pay their preacher. They got to pay for their materials that they use here for the Lord's Supper, so we'll just go ahead and help support this body of believers. So that's the way I do it. If you don't agree with that, that's fine, but that's the way I do it. How does anybody else do it? Use a little guidance here. How do you do it, David? Huh? And there's nothing wrong with that. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it to benefit the church here. Here is where you're a member. Or, I got a great idea. How about you give there and give here too when you get back? That might solve that problem. Sometimes when I talk, I think better when I'm talking. I just think, I guess I'll have to start doing that. Whom does the Bible say we are to give? Every one of us. Let him lay by in store. Now this Macedonia church giving and this thing of the Jewish poverty in Jerusalem, they were being, as we said before, they were being persecuted by Rome at every opportunity. The Jews always would blame the Christians if there was any problems, which they were the ones stirring everything up. But then if the Romans said, well, we're not just going to hate, it's their fault. They're the ones that's causing all this. So everybody persecuted them. And some of them probably, and I'm just theorizing, but some of them probably couldn't even go into a store and buy something if they were a Christian. So they were under some pretty heavy-duty needs, and Paul wanted to make sure that they were paid. Each man, each woman, each boy, and each girl, each deacon, each teacher, each preacher, each student, and each disciple. We join hands. When it says every one of you, that's everybody. That there's nobody excluded. A preacher preaches, well, yeah, we appreciate that, but they also get paid to do that. Well, they're not under any special arrangements to where they can kind of bypass that because I preach here. or you here because I attend. I mean, this giving, as we've been prospered, applies to everybody. Every person can give something. God expects no one to do what he cannot do. But even if it is only 1 cent that a person can give, God expects that. The widow gave 2 mites, of course, in Mark 12:22. The point here is that Christ requires a personal sacrifice. I think we could reasonably say that if it doesn't pinch us just a little bit when we give as far as our budgets, then we may not be giving as we should. Section 3, the specific requirement, the thing to be done, goes back to our original verse. There are many human schemes of financing church work. General public solicitations, bazaars, festivals, bingo games, parties, suppers, sales, entertainment, fish fries, cake walks, raffles, garage sales. It's not in there, but I know a church that does that. Similar human schemes are resorted to. These are unauthorized by God for financing his work. You know, one thing that I'm the most proud of the church, other than my stern belief that it is the right church, is that how many times on TV have you heard GBN asking for us to send them some money? They're supported by the churches, and the churches are supported by the members. How many times have you heard any of the other programs, Gospel of Christ? There's that one out in Oklahoma. I forget what it's called. I used to watch it, but what's In Search of the Lord's Way? Yeah. And then Brother Jeff Archie is now in charge of that one, the Fellowship of Truth or something like that. What is that? Yeah. International Gospel Hour, that's right. And not one of them do you ever see asking for money. However, every single, and I challenge anybody to show me different, every single denominational program, send it on in. God will bless you back, brother. You know, send it on in. Buy this book for only $29.99, and you'll be blessed for it. They say that while they've got 3 rings on each hand that are so big that I wouldn't want to do it. Great suits, their wives are out there with them, and they got big, giant, fake eyelashes and so much makeup you thought you could scrape it off. That's not what we do. We give because we want to give. We don't give, but you're not going to get blessed contrary to what they may say. I saw one guy the other day, I forget his name. He must have been on TV for 40 years. I saw him and I didn't even know who he was, and he's still on there wanting you to buy his book. There's nothing wrong with giving, of course, but it's not done in that way. Anybody disagree with that? And I don't mind calling them by name. What's that guy's name? It's always blinking so fast on TV. Got that big, huge church. Osteen, Joel Osteen. He constantly blinks. I don't know if that's to get the girls to think he's cute or what he's doing, but it's always about giving money. Okay, so you give money. So what do you do with that money, Joel? Well, I've heard the house he lives in is about 20,000 square feet. That's not what God wants. So we give here, we give humbly, we give in a way that we're blessed when we do it, and we're happy to do it, and that we depend on the elders to disperse that money in a way that is the most beneficial.
I think one of the things that we as
Can y'all hear that? If you didn't, Steve's talking about when we give, sometimes we forget that our blessing back from God is not just like give 10, get 20, give 50, get 100. It doesn't work that way. As you said, it could work out into where he gives us an extra measure of good health, an extra blessing of being grateful that we serve him, and all sorts of things that are good, and all good things come from God. We know that. So at the same time, we have to just give, not expecting anything except trusting in God. You know, we've brought this up before. You know, Paul, and this is an impressive statement. I have learned to be content, and I'm paraphrasing. I have learned to be content in whatever measure of life that I have. And that's exactly, absolutely exactly how we should be. If you've got a lot of money, be glad of it, and be a good Christian. If you've got not very much money, still be a good Christian. So anyway, these things that I just read, I thought at the top of page number 51, and I'm going to move pretty quickly here. These things like these solicitations and yard sales and all that, these cheapen the church in men's sight. And men are who looks at us outside, and those men include those that are lost. So it's like, you know, I thought you're supposed to give if you've been prospered. I read that somewhere, but they're not doing that. Well, we may never know he thinks that, but when we do these things, there's absolutely no scriptural basis for having that. It is up to the members that worship at that church. When the Bible says do, number one, it says lay by him in store. And at home, something was to be separated from the amount not given. Then it was to be taken and cast into the church treasury. The Greek word translated in store means literally put into the treasury. So I trust this man's judgment based on his position in the church. He was a very well-known gospel preacher for many, many years, and he probably knew a lot of Greek. Well, I don't, so I'll take his word on that that's what this means, to put into the treasury. Thus, there would be a common fund in which all Christians had an interest, into which they had contributed regardless of their differing abilities. And through this means they would have a common fellowship in the specific work. If you give absolutely of all you feel like that you're capable of giving, you're going to be blessed. If I give as much as I can give and I don't have very much, then I'm still going to be blessed, same way you are. God's not going to go, well, you didn't put in very much. You know, well, God knows that maybe somebody didn't have very much. Giving is to be proportionate. Human standards are not acceptable. Here are some human standards, and we won't revisit this again, but there's a bunch of excuses that people use. I may have said this before, but I remember one time hearing my daddy say that it's a shame that they don't print as many, just use the $2 bill instead of the $1 bill, because then the church treasury would double. You know, and I thought, well, it don't make no sense. Well, it makes a lot of sense. You know, how much, in section B, how much does the Bible require? As God has prospered him. Apparently trying to evade duty, some say they cannot understand this. They do not know how much they have been prospered. Have you ever worried with that. Am I giving enough? Am I doing what I should? I don't know how much is enough. You know? Well, I like the comparison here. It says this is to impeach the integrity of God, for He said for us to do it this way. We tell the Federal Bureau of Internal Revenue how much we prosper. Usually we own clothing, houses, cars, eat food, and take vacations as God has prospered us in proportion to our ability to do these things. Why should we have trouble with this regarding liberality to God? I mean, we don't buy another car because we can't afford another car. Well, I know that. I sure can't afford another truck. Grief, it's a pretty expensive proposition. To prosper means to gain or to receive something, and when one gives as he's prospered, he gives according to his gains or receipts, according to that which he has and not according to that which he does not have. As good stewards, we should ask, how much of the master's goods can I afford to keep and use for myself, rather than how much shall I give? Is the bell rung? Once? Okay. I'm glad we got somebody can hear. You know, Sister Sybil is, I'm still mad at her. We were in Brother Zeckman's Wednesday night class, and all the seats were full except the one on the end. Well, the one on the end is the nearest to the bell. And I'm sitting there listening to Brother Zeckman, and all of a sudden, that buzzer went off, and I guess I jumped this high out of the chair, and I looked around to see if anybody saw me, and she was laughing her head off. One of my favorite people, by the way. Giving to be preventative. Paul's plan is the Lord's plan and will provide adequately for accomplishing what God requires. It will prevent last-minute, hasty, unplanned giving. Go back to that same subject of being taking up the contribution. You know, here comes a collection tray, and somebody goes, and they go to grabbing. That's not planning on how much you're going to give. It's better than nothing, I guess, but the purpose named that there be no gatherings when I come. Paul planned to go to Corinth to gather the contributions of several congregations and send to Jerusalem by approved messengers. He wanted to prevent collections when he arrived by their having already done upon arrival. This implies planned, purposeful, promised, liberal giving that sufficient funds may be on hand to meet the needs before the congregation. This will prevent resorting to unscriptural means to raise money for the Lord's work. We left out bingo. We got yard sales in, but we left out bingo. If you want to play bingo, that's fine, but don't do it in the name of the church. Paul's 5-point plan of church finance is applicable to the Lord's church today. It cannot be improved upon. Let every congregation adopt it and every disciple cooperate in making the plan successful. Is the second bell rung? Okay. I'm not too far off schedule then. I appreciate everybody's attendance. I hope you'll be back next week. Brother Steve has informed me that I'll be bringing this lesson number 12 next week and number 13 on the 22nd, and Steve's going to be out of town that week, and following that lesson, Steve is going to be studying from the book of James. So you might be wanting to read the book of James and familiarize yourself with it. So I appreciate everybody's attendance.